Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the SD.RB podcast. Today Kevin Clark will be discussing his Summer of Rails project, where he'll be doing extensive work on mkmf.
Okay, so the idea was I wasn't satisfied with track. On the Rails list, it was really a pain in the ass to watch 20, 50 tickets come by a day and not know how important anything was. And they've got these drop-down boxes for priority and severity, but everybody thinks their bug is the most important. I mean, I do. It's affecting me, so it's important. So I want it fixed now. What I wanted was something where the community could say, "This is a real problem. This is not a real problem." So the idea is that people can vote on tickets. So when you submit a ticket, I'm actually not logged in, so let me do that real quick. Actually, I don't recall if we required that or not. It changed a couple times during the course of the app. This was all written in 24 hours, which is really cool. So you can submit a ticket, defect or enhancement. Remind us doesn't load. I think it's a big deal. So this is a showstopper. Yeah. So I don't have that product showing up. So I'm just going to add it to Advisr. You can add tags. DOM app loading. It just doesn't come up. You can also add attachments. So here I voted on this and said it was a big problem for me. But let's look at another one where other people have weighed in. So here we've got sort of a weird percentage. So user pages is something that was, let's see, we've got links to user pages, but we don't actually have user pages in the application. So I said it was a showstopper. I definitely use it. Other people said it wasn't such a big deal. But we can change this on the fly if we want to. I probably wouldn't use user pages, honestly. So it changes all there on the fly. It changes our percentage. And now when we look at the front page, it's further down, and we get something that's more important at the top of the queue. So that's Advisr. 24 hours, it was really cool. Anyway, let me show off my... thanks. Cool. So let me show off my Summer of Code project. So this is an official Summer of Code project. There were 10 of us chosen from 85, I think, for Ruby to be sponsored by Google. And this is what I started with. This is mkmf. It's a library to build makefiles to compile C extensions to Ruby. It's a mouthful, and it's much more complicated than the sentence conveys. This is basically a 1,000-line hack. If you just scroll through it, you can kind of see the structure. It's these bizarre little functions placed all over the place that don't really, work together. You can't reuse any of this code. You've got methods called like trilink0 and trilink. It's a huge pain to work on, and there's no reliable documentation. There's also no tests, so you can't change it even if you want to. So I wanted to do something better. And because we're using Ruby, I thought that using makefiles was a little outmoded. So I'm using rakefiles. My new project is called mkrf. And it comes out to about 250 lines. This is not the right file. Let's see. I don't think everything... Oh, here's the trunk file. Here we go. Okay, so it basically breaks down to do two different objects. You've got availability, which is the bulky one. This handles whether you can find libraries, functions, headers. It's with all of these comments, it's only about 200 lines. Without the comments, it's much less. So basically, it lets you find out if you can include a library, whether it has a header, has a function, and that's really all availability needs to do, is tell you whether that exists or not. And one of the goals is actually to be able to integrate this into Ruby gems, which Chad Fowler's kind of excited to do because mkmf is so poorly written, they had to roll their own version for Ruby gems. So at the end of the project, it'll use this, hopefully. This should be bundled with rake at the end of the summer. The other half is the generator, which is really simple and which is how you actually use the code. So an example extension configuration would look something like this. It can be as simple as just saying, this is the name of the library I'd like to build. By default, it expects that you're using C, dot lowercase c extensions, and that all the files are in the lib directory. And these two lines are all you need. Right now, it doesn't handle cross operating system very well. That's actually my next goal for the project. So this will actually generate a rake file for you. And to show that off, I've got in this test directory a bunch of sample files that I like to build against. Although I think this is out of date. So let me go to the trunk. So sample files, we've got this trivial library that I wrote. It's one line. All it is a C extension that just sort of sits there. We define a class and that's it. This is basically the simplest possible Ruby class you can write in C. So the extension configuration for that looks like this. All we do is say it's a new generated mkrf file. We want to build a libtrivial bundle. So from here, we just run Ruby. It does its thing. And in a second, we get our rake file, which automatically can handle building our code. So there, we built it. We can see here's our libtrivial. It works. It also works for more complex applications. For example, one of the first libraries I tested this against was Libxml, which is a little bit more complicated. If you look at Libxml's original mkmf, it's actually pretty complicated. This is ugly. The old xconf looks like this. So it deals with C flags. It's configuring different directories for trying to include libraries. We've got all this extra crap sitting there that could be simplified. So I wanted to be able to make more beautiful extension configurations. So ours, it's still got some of the cruft because I'm still cleaning up. But basically, this looks a whole lot more Ruby-like. We create a new generator and we pass it a block. And from the block, we include new things like libraries. We can add our own definitions. One thing I wanted to fix was that in mkmf, you've basically got two methods when you need one. You've got find library and have library. And have library, you just pass the name and try and find it based on the paths that you've got. Find library, you pass a bunch of paths and the name, and hopefully it finds it. So I wanted to incorporate it into one. For me, include library optionally takes paths at the end that you can pass to it. So if it's may not be in the default place, we don't have to use a different method. We can just continue adding things to the end. And this is as far as it goes, these 49 lines. And that's translating basically verbatim from their copy. And it does in fact work. Let's see. So on this one, you'll notice that it doesn't follow the conventions that I expect. We put the extension configuration in the same directory as the C files, so we need to add that to our options. But other than that, it's still easy to run. XML's got a really screwy directory structure where they have an extension directory and then an XML directory. Anyway, you just run xconf, and it does its thing, and rake magically builds everything for you, which is cool. You can see the rake file right here. So that's the whole thing. Eventually, I'd like to also add in automatic gem bundling, because most extensions are going to be distributed as a gem, RDoc generation, that sort of thing. So that's my project. Steve? yeah, actually, the secret plan that Chad Fowler and Jim Wyrick have had is that they want to put this in Rake, which they want to get into Core, which would make mkrf and Rake the standard build utilities for Ruby, which would be really cool because Make can be a pain to work with. And, if we're working with Ruby, it'd be nice to work with Ruby. Are there other questions? Cool. Dom, are you good to show off your thing? Is it working? Cool. Oh, yes. Sorry. Just a second. Large type. So, if you want to pull RailsDay applications, you got to find the team number. But this is the URL. Add the number to the end. If you want to look at Advisr, it was team 3. Blockchain was team 2. What were you guys? 76 for Remind Us. So, you good to go? Cool. Okay. Yeah, no problem.
That concludes this episode of the SD.RB podcast. See you next time.